Hey everybody, today we are talking about Pax by Sarah Pennypacker. When I first saw this book, it was at a Target and we were looking for a completely different book for my husband, and I saw Pax Journey Home and thought it looked so cute, and so AJ's like, just get it, and I was like, okay. And then when we got home, he found out that this is actually a sequel. And so he went ahead and got the first one for me so that I would not be completely and utterly lost and not understand why I felt like I was missing something if I just started with this one. So we're going to go ahead and talk about both of them together. I read them back to back, and it is basically a story about a fox named Pax. I will just say, since I am going to be reviewing them both, I do like to keep my things pretty spoiler free, but once I start talking about the second book, I'm gonna have to talk about things in the first book at least a little for it to make sense. So if you want to watch part of this review, if you haven't read either of the books and you think, oh, that sounds like a really cute story, then just pause once I get to the second book and you can continue to read the books on your own and then come back to watch the last half, or whatever you want to do is fine with me, but I just want you to be aware of that. It is a book that is like a middle grade, I would say. So this is kind of different from what I usually review about, since it is supposed to be geared more towards children. However, I will say these books have some darker themes in it that I would not really imagine a child reading about. Like it's kind of dark in some areas, and so that's why I say I probably lean more towards middle grade, maybe like 6th, 7th grade, 8th grade. Like it's not, I wouldn't say like elementary age. Anyway, on to the story. So Pax, the first one, starts out right away with the main character, Peter, being driven to the woods by his dad because a war is happening. And they have Pax in the back seat with Peter, and Peter is crying, and it's in the perspective of Pax. This story goes back and forth between Pax and Peter in their perspective. I really like the way that she wrote it to where it isn't like a cheesy way of having the fox talk. Usually when the fox is speaking or thinking things, it is in italics rather than it being like, yada yada yada, said Pax, like, so that it makes it seem like he's speaking English. Like I just think it was a good way to represent Pax and his part of the story. And then we have Peter's side. So the first part starts with Pax, and he sees that his boy is crying. He calls him his boy, and he didn't understand why it seemed like he was crying. And it turns out that it's because Peter was abandoning him there in the woods, because his dad said that he had to, because he was going to war, and so Peter was going to have to go live with his grandfather, like really like 300 miles away, and it just wasn't going to fly having a fox as a pet at his grandfather's house. So it's really sad because he'd rescued Pax when he was a little baby, and so Pax grew up with Peter for 5 years, and so Peter's like 12-ish, almost 13-ish, and has to give up his pet that he's grown so close to, because his dad says it's the only way. Very soon after that, we get Peter's story, Peter's perspective in the next chapter, and it is just him kind of talking to his grandfather, getting used to this new house that he's going to have to stay to, because tomorrow he goes off to school and his dad goes off to war. And as he is in his bedroom, lying there, he comes to a realization that what he did wasn't right. He shouldn't have left Pax there. That was a terrible thing for him to just abandon his fox, his pet, his like companion. He shouldn't have done that. And so he decides, instead of going to school tomorrow, he's going to kind of essentially run away and just walk 300 miles back to those woods and rescue Pax and take him back. And then instead of going back to his grandfather's, go to a closer distance to his old house where he and his dad lived, and just stay there and just take care of himself, basically. And for someone who is 12, And that doesn't really seem like the best idea, especially walking for that long of a distance by yourself. But he packed a pack with a bunch of essentials, some food, some things like that, some jackets, and he just kind of mapped out how much he would have to walk each day in order to make this possible. And so he goes on, and some unexpected things happen where he gets injured and he doesn't know what to do. So he's kind of in a tough spot when somebody ends up finding him. And that is a really kind lady, kind in her own way. She doesn't come off kind right away because she's like, what are you doing in my barn? Why are you here? Like, you're injured. Why are you injured? Like, you need to go back home. And so she was pretty firm with him. But it turns out that she, underneath, is a very kind soul and has a lot of her own demons that she needs to overcome that has kind of made her be a little bit bitter. But underneath, she's actually a very caring person, and she helps Peter get back to a place where he can start to walk on his ankle, which is now, he's not going to be able to fully walk on it again for like 6 weeks. And he's like, I cannot wait 6 weeks. Pax will not be there anymore. I have to go now. And so he's very impatient about the whole thing. They build this relationship with him doing these 3 conditions that she said that he has to do before she will allow him to go and try to find Pax. So that is a big part of it, him preparing to go back to be able to get to Pax eventually. And Pax, it's still going back and forth, so we still have Pax's perspective of, oh, my humans will come back for me, my boy will come back for me, and him realizing that maybe his boy actually isn't going to come back for him. And he meets a couple of other foxes that wander to him, and they're like, no, humans are bad. Humans are bad no matter what. They are bad. And he's like, my humans are not bad. And they're like, well, they left you here, didn't they? And so he's having to kind of fend for himself and figure out how to hunt for food, which he's never had to do before. All these fox instincts that have been suppressed because he never had to do them living with a human and who fed him and let him play in the yard, but never actually allowed him to get his full fox instincts to kick in. And so he's kind of having to learn all this stuff for the first time, even though he is a grown fox. And so we get to see that part as well, and how he reacts with other foxes and what kind of dangers he might come across in the woods. I think it's a really great story, a really well done written story, which is why I say, again, it doesn't seem like a children's book at first, because I compare it to things I was reading when I was in elementary school, and I feel like those books were a lot more simple than this one here. This one is a little bit more up there for like understanding and just the writing, the way that the writing is. So I really like it. I really liked it a lot, and it was a pretty fast paced read because of it being a little bit bigger font and being a more geared towards kids. It was easier to read a little bit faster. And so I was able to finish it pretty quickly and was able to go right on to the next one, which is, the second book is called Pax Journey Home. So from this point on, I'm going to start talking about the second book. If you want to read both of these books, then please pause here, read the books first, because now I'm going to start spoiling a little bit of the first book so that I can talk about this second part of these 2 books. Pax Journey Home is the sequel to Pax, and it is set about a year after the events that happened in the first book. The first book basically leaves us at a place that is heartwarming, but also heartbreaking, I would say. It leaves us in a state where we felt like that was probably the best way that the story could end, but also a sad thing that we didn't necessarily want to happen. By this, I mean to say, the ending was pretty abrupt. It did happen pretty quickly. Peter was able to make the trek and was able to find his lost fox. But when he saw that his fox was with 2 other foxes and that he had learned to be a fox in the wild, he suddenly thought it wasn't right for him to take him back home. He thought, well, now you have your own family. Now Pax is with these other 2 foxes. There's no way that I could separate him now. I think Peter basically realized the damage was done, like that he did take too long to get there, so he needed to let Pax go. And so within this year that has passed, Pax has created this safe space in these woods with these two foxes that he found in the first book. Bristle is the fox, the girl fox that he bonded with, and Bristle has a little brother named Runt who is also living with them, and Bristle is pregnant. And so he is going to be having his own family in these woods, and it's very exciting, and he's enjoying being a fox. That never would have happened if he'd stayed with Peter, or if he'd gone back with Peter. Now, Peter is, a human, so he has a lot more emotions than Pax in terms of guilt and all of the negative emotions that we feel. And he's having a really hard time just worrying that Pax is actually not okay. He doesn't know for sure if Pax is even still alive, if he actually stayed with those foxes that he saw him with at the end of the other book. He has no idea what is going to happen to Pax, and to help him cope, he kind of just tries to imagine or think of Pax being dead and that it's basically his fault and he gets this, like, he calls it his penance, and he tries to repeat things over and over in his head whenever he thinks about Pax, to just try to keep him from thinking about that part of his life. He's tried to black it completely out. He's tried to say that he should, instead of saving Pax, he should have ended Pax's life when he found him as a little kid. He should have just ended it there so that it could prevent any of the future suffering that Pax would have being in the wild and being abandoned by him and all these things. And I'm just thinking, that is such a dark, sad thing for a now almost 14-year-old boy to be thinking about an animal that he loved so much, that he feels so guilty about what he did that he can't just imagine the positive thing. Like, maybe Pax is fine. Maybe Pax does have a little family now. Maybe Pax is okay without him in his life anymore. And instead of thinking happy thoughts, he has to think guilt and sadness towards the way the situation ended. And I just think that is such a hard thing. And he's also started feeling these negative feelings towards Vola as well, who is the woman that he went back to. He went back to the cabin to and decided that he wanted to live with her instead of going back to his grandfather. Once he realized his plan to live at his old home with Pax kind of failed, he decided he was going to live with Vola, and she said, "This place is too small for us. Why don't you build your own cabin next door, and you can stay there as long as you want?" And so he started making his own cabin and putting a lot of work into it. And so this last year, he was just very dedicated in doing that and making it worth his time and just having a purpose. He did end up becoming friends with some people at school and is really enjoying this distraction. But as it starts to be close to him finishing the cabin, he realizes that it's something that Vola said, that he just kind of thought, oh no, I'm getting too close to this person, and all that's going to happen is heartbreak if I get too close to someone. I should mention, part of the reason that he's feeling this way isn't just because of the Pax situation. It's also because of his parents, with his dad going off in the war in the first book. And his mom had already been dead for quite a few years, died around the time when he found Pax. And so Pax kind of, I think, filled that gap for him as well. And so not having Pax also makes him think about how he doesn't have his mother, and now he doesn't have his father, and so he doesn't want to get close to anybody again because he just feels like he's going to lose them anyway, and that pain will be worse. And so he's just shutting any type of relationship out that could be too close. So when he realizes that Vola says that he can stay in the cabin and that he can just stay here as long as he wants, and once he realizes that once the cabin's built, he's actually meant to stay there and she wants him there, and he realizes that that relationship is going to get way too close for comfort, he realizes that he can't do it. And so he signs up for this group called Water Warriors, I think. And it's basically a group of people that are going around cleaning up the water supply in the rivers and the ponds because of all the chemicals that got into it from the war. And so they're trying to get the water clean again so that people won't get sick by drinking it, and making a difference. And he realizes that this is what he should do. And he realizes it even more when he finds out that one of the groups are going to be going close to where his old house was. And he thought, this is perfect. I'll go with them. Once I get to that location, I will stay there and I won't come back, and I'll live on my own in my old house where I'm meant to be, and I will just fend for myself there. So that's what he decides to do. He sets out, he gets with the group of water warriors, but unexpectedly ends up becoming friends with this girl and this guy that are together, that are really cool. And he starts to let them in a little bit, and realizes, no, I can't do that, because again, I don't want to get hurt by getting too close to people. And so he just has this struggle like the whole book through. But not to give too much away for the middle to end of this book, he's just going with this group and trying not to think about Pax. We are getting Pax's side of things. Pax is actually trying to find a new location because these humans, they are worried, are part of the war again, even though it's the water warriors and they're actually helping the water get better. They don't know that. They're foxes. So they think that there's danger. And so Pax is actually going on a little journey to try to find a new place for his family to live. And so that's happening at the same time as Peter is traveling. But yeah, I can't really say much more about without giving too many things away. So, which, you know, is kind of my thing. I don't really like giving too much away because I want you to read it yourself. I enjoyed both of the books. I thought they were both worth reading. I think the second book was probably a little better than the first, just because we really get to know more of the feelings that Peter is having. And we also get to see Pax with his own family, which is really nice. But I just think that if you read one, you should definitely just read the other. Like, you might as well read both. They don't take that long to get through, and it's a nice little story. It's honestly what I was kind of wanting when I was reading Fox Crossing last year, which I thought was going to be about a fox, which it kind of was, but it was mostly just about these two people that lived in the town and their relationship with each other, and the fox just kind of was there sometimes, but didn't have their own perspective, their own chapters in the way that this fox did. So I liked this because it was letting me kind of read an animal book, a story about an animal, and I actually got to see his perspective, but it wasn't in like a super childish way where the animals are talking to each other, where it feels more like a kid book. It was hitting the mark for what I was wanting out of a fox tale, I guess you could say. So if you're interested in reading one of these books, I would read them both. I would just read them both back to back because they look like they're pretty big, but it's just because the paper's fancy. It's got that like ripped texture look. And so really it actually goes by really quickly, and we get to see the growth from Peter, 12-year-old Peter, to pretty much 14-year-old Peter. We get to see the growth also in Pax from being around humans all the time to starting his own family and to be an actual fox instead of a pet. And so we get to see the growth of both of those characters. And we also get to see a really good story surrounding Vola as well. And I really like that element too. But yeah, anyway, hopefully you found that review helpful in deciding if you want to read these books. But yeah, thank you so much for watching. I appreciate you, and I will see you in the next one. Bye.